Have you ever stopped to consider that everything you think you know about yourself might be a carefully constructed illusion? That the person you present to the world, the identity you cling to so desperately, is nothing more than a mask covering something far more profound and mysterious? I understand that feeling of looking in the mirror and sensing a stranger staring back at you. For years, I believed that self-knowledge was about accumulating information about my personality, my likes and dislikes, my strengths and weaknesses. I read every psychology book, took every personality test, analyzed every childhood memory trying to understand who I truly was. And the more I searched, the more confused I became. Because deep down, beneath all those layers of self-analysis, there was a nagging sensation that I was missing something fundamental, something the ancient wisdom keepers like Manly P. Hall tried to illuminate throughout their teachings. What if I told you that there are psychological facts about human nature so profound, so universally true, that when you truly understand them, your entire perception of yourself transforms instantly, not through years of therapy or endless introspection, but through a single shift in awareness that reveals what has been hidden in plain sight all along. These are not theories or philosophical concepts, but observable patterns in human consciousness that have been documented across cultures and centuries, patterns that expose the true nature of who you really are beneath the constructed self. In the next few moments, we are going to explore these psychological truths together, and I promise you, by the end of this journey, you will never see yourself quite the same way again. The first psychological fact that Manly P. Hall emphasized throughout his work is perhaps the most unsettling one to contemplate. You are not one unified self, but a multitude of selves constantly competing for dominance within your consciousness. Ancient wisdom traditions called this the many faces of the soul, while modern psychology speaks of subpersonalities or ego states. Watch yourself carefully throughout a single day, and you will witness this phenomenon directly. In the morning, you might be the ambitious achiever, driven and focused on your goals. By afternoon, perhaps the wounded child emerges, seeking validation and afraid of rejection. In the evening, maybe the critic appears, judging everything you did and said throughout the day. Each of these aspects genuinely believes it is you, yet none of them represents your true nature. The real you is not any of these passing characters, but rather the consciousness observing them all, the awareness that remains unchanged while these various personas play out their roles on the stage of your mind. This is why you can feel so conflicted, so torn between different desires and impulses. It is not weakness or confusion. It is simply the natural condition of human consciousness that has not yet awakened to its own multiplicity. Hall often spoke about how the masses live their entire lives identified with whichever subpersonality happens to be dominant at any given moment, never questioning whether there might be something deeper observing all of this internal theater. And here is where the transformation begins, in the simple recognition that you are not the actors, you are the stage upon which they perform. The second psychological truth cuts even deeper into the heart of self-deception. Everything you judge most harshly in others is a direct reflection of what you have rejected and denied within yourself. Carl Jung called this the shadow, that vast repository of qualities, impulses, and characteristics that we deem unacceptable and therefore banish from our conscious awareness. But here is the profound insight that most people miss completely. The shadow does not disappear simply because you refuse to look at it. Instead, it gets projected outward onto the world around you, and you begin to see your own rejected aspects reflected back to you through other people. When someone triggers intense irritation or disgust in you, when you find yourself consumed with judgment about how another person lives their life, you are not actually reacting to them at all. You are reacting to the disowned part of yourself that they are unknowingly mirroring back to you. Manly P. Hall understood this principle deeply and spoke often about how the unintegrated aspects of our nature become the demons and devils we imagine exist outside ourselves. Think about the person who infuriates you most in your life right now. What specific qualities do they possess that provoke such strong reactions in you? Are they selfish, arrogant, weak, manipulative, irresponsible? Now ask yourself honestly, where do these same qualities exist within you? Perhaps in forms so subtle or disguised that you have successfully convinced yourself they are not there. This is not about blame or guilt. It is about recognition. The universe is constantly showing you yourself through the mirror of other people, offering you opportunities to reclaim the fragmented pieces of your psyche and become whole again. Every person you encounter is a teacher, not because of their wisdom or virtue, but because they reveal to you something about your own inner landscape that you have not yet fully acknowledged or integrated. The third psychological fact is perhaps the most liberating when truly understood. Your thoughts do not belong to you, and they are certainly not you. The mind that you imagine to be your personal possession is actually more like a radio receiver, picking up signals from the collective consciousness of humanity, from cultural programming, from ancestral patterns encoded in your nervous system, from the morphic fields of information that surround all living things. Observe your thoughts for a few moments right now. Where do they come from? Do you consciously choose each thought that appears? Do you decide in advance what you will think about next? Of course not. Thoughts simply arise spontaneously from somewhere beyond your conscious control, and you claim ownership of them after the fact. This is the great illusion that keeps most people trapped in suffering. We believe that because thoughts appear in our awareness, they must be our thoughts, must represent our true beliefs and desires. But Hall and other esoteric teachers throughout history have pointed to a deeper truth. Consciousness is primary, and thoughts are simply phenomena that appear within consciousness, like clouds passing through an empty sky. You are not your thoughts. You are the space in which thoughts appear and disappear. This recognition changes everything because suddenly, you realize you do not have to believe every thought, do not have to act on every impulse, do not have to defend every opinion that arises in your mind. You can begin to relate to thoughts as temporary visitors rather than permanent residents of your inner world. Most of the psychological suffering that people endure comes from taking their thoughts too seriously, from believing that the constant stream of mental commentary represents some kind of ultimate truth about reality. But what if those thoughts are just noise, just the background static of a consciousness that has not yet learned to tune itself to a clearer frequency? Here is the fourth psychological truth that reveals something profound about human nature. You are not motivated by what you consciously claim to want, but by deep unconscious needs and drives that you rarely acknowledge even to yourself. Psychology has demonstrated repeatedly that our true motivations are often completely opposite to what we profess. The person who claims to value peace above all else might actually be addicted to drama and conflict because it gives them a sense of aliveness they cannot access any other way. The individual who insists they want intimate connection might be unconsciously sabotaging every relationship because deep down, vulnerability terrifies them more than loneliness. We construct elaborate rational explanations for our behavior, creating stories that paint us in a favorable light, but these narratives are usually just sophisticated forms of self-deception. Manly P. Hall spoke extensively about how the lower nature, the unredeemed aspects of consciousness, operates through clever disguises and justifications. It presents selfish motives as selfless service, fear as practical wisdom, avoidance as spiritual detachment, and because we desperately want to believe we are good people with pure intentions, we accept these disguises at face value and never examine what is really driving our choices. This is why self-knowledge requires such brutal honesty, such willingness to look beneath the surface of our stated values and see what we are actually demonstrating through our actions. Your true values are not what you say you believe. They are what you do when no one is watching, where you actually invest your time and energy, what you are willing to sacrifice for. Most people would be shocked if they could see their actual hierarchy of values clearly, because it rarely matches the idealized self-image they have cultivated. But this recognition is not meant to induce shame or self-judgment. It is meant to wake you up to the reality that you are still largely unconscious, still being moved by forces you do not fully understand, still operating from programs installed in you by family, society, and your own unprocessed pain. And once you see this clearly, once you admit that you do not actually know yourself nearly as well as you thought you did, then real transformation becomes possible. The fifth psychological fact brings us closer to the heart of who you really are beneath all the conditioning and confusion. You have an innate need for meaning that supersedes even your need for happiness or pleasure. This is what Viktor Frankl discovered in the concentration camps, what philosophers throughout history have intuited, what Manly P. Hall understood about the human soul's fundamental orientation. You can endure almost any suffering if you believe it serves a larger purpose, if you can weave it into a narrative that makes sense of your experience. But without meaning, Even the most comfortable and privileged life feels empty and unbearable. This is why so many people in modern society, despite having more material abundance than any previous generation, struggle with depression, anxiety, and a pervasive sense that something essential is missing. They have been sold the lie that happiness comes from external circumstances, from accumulating enough wealth, success, pleasure, and security. But happiness, as it turns out, is not a sustainable goal because it depends entirely on temporary conditions that are beyond your ultimate control. Meaning, however, is something you create through how you relate to your circumstances, through the story you tell yourself about what your experiences signify. Hall emphasized repeatedly that the spiritual path is not about escaping suffering or attaining some blissful state of permanent contentment. It is about discovering that your life, with all its challenges and struggles, is part of a larger pattern of soul development that gives everything significance. When you understand that difficulties are not punishments or mistakes, but rather initiations, opportunities for consciousness to expand and evolve, then your entire relationship with your experience transforms. You stop asking, why is this happening to me, and start asking, what is this here to teach me? What aspect of my consciousness is being called to awaken through this particular challenge? This shift from victim to student, from someone to whom life happens randomly to someone who is consciously participating in their own evolution, is one of the most profound psychological reorientations possible. Vou fazer uma pausa aqui por momento, porque sinto que algo importante está acontecendo enquanto você me ouve. Talvez você esteja sentindo aquele nó na garganta, aquela emoção que surge quando uma verdade profunda toca algo dentro de você. Você tem vivido tanto tempo tentando entender quem você é, não é mesmo? Quantas vezes você já se perguntou em silêncio por que continua repetindo os mesmos padrões, atraindo as mesmas situações, lutando contra as mesmas partes de si mesmo? Você não está sozinho nessa sensação. Na verdade, esse é o exato momento onde muitos desistem, pensando que talvez nunca conseguirão realmente se conhecer ou se transformar. Quero que você faça algo simples, mas profundamente poderoso agora. Compartilhe nos comentários. I am ready to see myself as I truly am. Esta não é apenas uma frase bonita, é uma declaração ao universo, uma abertura da consciência que você emite. E algo extraordinário acontece quando expressamos isso em palavras. Primeiro, você reconhece este padrão em sua própria vida. Segundo, você ajuda incontáveis outras pessoas que estão lendo os comentários neste exato momento. Pessoas que pensavam que eram as únicas a sentir essa confusão sobre sua verdadeira natureza. Seu comentário pode ser a luz que alguém precisava ver hoje, a confirmação de que não está sozinho, de que existe uma jornada real de autoconhecimento além das máscaras que usamos. Então, por favor, compartilhe agora. Este pequeno ato de coragem pode ser o primeiro passo para uma transformação profunda, não apenas para você, mas para todos que serão tocados por suas palavras. The sixth psychological truth takes us even deeper into the mystery of consciousness. You are constantly creating your reality through the lens of your beliefs, but most of these beliefs were installed in you before you had any capacity to question or choose them. By the age of 7, your fundamental worldview was already largely established, built from the repeated messages you received from parents, culture, religion, and early experiences. These core beliefs operate like invisible filters, determining what you notice and ignore, what you consider possible or impossible, what you feel you deserve or do not deserve. And here is the remarkable part that most people never realize. You are not seeing reality as it is, you are seeing reality as you are. Two people can experience the exact same event and construct completely different narratives about what happened based on their underlying belief systems. The person who believes the world is fundamentally hostile will interpret ambiguous situations as threatening. The person who believes they are unworthy will find evidence of rejection even in neutral interactions. Your beliefs literally shape your perception, which shapes your emotional responses, which shapes your behavior, which then produces results that confirm your original beliefs. This is the self-fulfilling prophecy that Hall and other wisdom teachers have tried to illuminate for those with ears to hear. You are trapped in a loop of your own creation, constantly generating evidence that validates your existing worldview, never questioning whether that worldview might be fundamentally flawed. But here is where tremendous power lies. If your beliefs create your experience of reality, then changing your beliefs can transform your entire world. This is not positive thinking or wishful affirmation. It is recognizing that consciousness is creative, that awareness precedes and shapes form, that you are not a passive recipient of reality, but an active participant in its ongoing creation. The challenge is that core beliefs are largely unconscious, operating below the threshold of ordinary awareness. You cannot change what you cannot see. This is why practices of self-observation are so essential, why you must learn to watch your own mind with the same curiosity you might bring to studying a foreign landscape. What assumptions are you making about yourself, about other people, about how life works? Where did these assumptions come from? Are they actually true, or have they simply been true for you because you have never questioned them? The seventh psychological fact reveals something crucial about human development and the possibility of transformation. You cannot think your way into a new way of being, but you can act your way into a new way of thinking. This insight contradicts everything our thought-obsessed culture teaches us about change. We believe that first we must understand ourselves completely, analyze all our patterns, figure out the root causes of our issues, and then, armed with all this knowledge, we will finally be able to change. But psychological research and spiritual wisdom both point to a different truth. Behavior change precedes and produces cognitive change, not the other way around. When you take action that is inconsistent with your current self-image, when you do something your old identity would never do, it creates what psychologists call cognitive dissonance. Your mind cannot tolerate the contradiction between who you think you are and what you are actually doing. So it begins to revise your self-concept to align with your new behavior. This is how transformation actually happens in the real world. You do not wait until you feel confident before taking courageous action. You take the action, and through the process of taking it, confidence emerges. You do not wait until you feel loving before behaving lovingly towards someone. You practice loving behavior, and gradually your internal state shifts to match your external actions. Manly P. Hall emphasized this principle when he taught that spiritual development requires practice, not just contemplation. You must engage in the disciplines, perform the rituals, embody the qualities you wish to develop, even when doing so feels awkward and false at first. Eventually, the external practice becomes internalized, and what began as an act becomes your natural way of being. This is the great secret that keeps most people trapped in endless self-analysis without ever actually changing. They are waiting for some magical moment when they will suddenly understand themselves completely, and transformation will just happen effortlessly. But that moment never comes because understanding alone changes nothing. It is action, embodied practice, concrete choices in actual situations that rewire your consciousness and create genuine transformation. The eighth psychological truth addresses one of the most painful aspects of the human condition. You are fundamentally alone in your subjective experience, and no one can ever fully understand what it is like to be you. This is not meant to be depressing, but rather liberating when properly understood. So much of human suffering comes from the desperate attempt to be seen, known, and validated by others, to find someone who can climb inside your consciousness and confirm that your experience is real and worthwhile. But this is impossible. Everyone is trapped in their own unique perspective, interpreting everything through the filter of their particular conditioning, wounds, and preoccupations. When someone claims to understand you, what they actually understand is their projection of you, the version of you that makes sense within their worldview. The real you, the subjective felt sense of your existence, remains forever private and inaccessible to anyone else. Hall spoke often about how each soul is on its own unique journey of awakening, and while we can walk alongside each other, we cannot walk the path for each other. This recognition can initially feel isolating, but it actually points toward a profound liberation. If you truly accept that no one can validate your existence for you, that no external recognition can fill the void of self-abandonment, then you must turn inward and find your own ground of being. You must become the source of your own validation, the witness of your own experience, the one who knows yourself regardless of whether anyone else ever does. This is what it means to mature spiritually, to stop outsourcing your sense of worth and reality to other people, and reclaim it as something that originates within your own consciousness. And paradoxically, once you stop needing others to complete you, once you establish your own internal sense of wholeness, then genuine connection becomes possible. You can meet people as they actually are rather than as need fulfillment objects, and they can encounter the real you rather than the desperate performance you put on when seeking their approval. The ninth psychological fact reveals something that most people spend their entire lives resisting. Everything you try to control is actually controlling you. This paradox lies at the heart of human suffering and is central to understanding what Manly P. Hall meant by surrender and the spiritual path. Watch how your mind operates throughout any given day. How much energy do you expend trying to manage your thoughts, suppress your emotions, control how other people perceive you, ensure that situations unfold according to your preferences? And what is the result of all this effort? Usually more anxiety, more tension, more exhaustion, and the persistent feeling that you are failing because reality stubbornly refuses to conform to your demands. The ego, that false sense of separate self, believes it can and should control everything. But consciousness, your true nature, has no need for control because it recognizes that everything is already unfolding perfectly according to laws and patterns far more intelligent than the small mind can comprehend. When you grasp tightly to something, trying to possess it or preserve it exactly as it is, you create suffering for yourself because everything in manifest reality is temporary and constantly changing. The only thing you can truly control is your own awareness, your own response to what arises. And even there, the control is not about forcing yourself to think or feel differently, but rather about choosing where to place your attention, what meaning to assign to your experiences. This is the art of spiritual maturity that Hall dedicated his life to teaching. It is learning to distinguish between what is yours to change and what is yours to accept, between active participation and neurotic control, between conscious choice and compulsive reaction. Most people never learn this distinction, and so they exhaust themselves fighting battles that cannot be won, trying to make reality conform to their preferences rather than discovering the freedom that exists in alignment with what is. The 10th and perhaps most profound psychological fact brings us full circle to where we began. The self you think you are searching for does not exist as a fixed, discoverable entity. There is no true self hiding beneath all the false selves, waiting to be uncovered like a treasure buried in the ground. This is the ultimate paradox that mystics throughout history have tried to communicate, what Hall called the mystery of being. You are not a thing, not a static object that can be known once and for all. You are a process, a continual becoming, consciousness flowing and evolving and expressing itself through an infinite variety of forms. Every time you think you have finally figured yourself out, finally understand who you really are, life presents a situation that reveals new dimensions of your being you never knew existed. This is not a failure of self-knowledge. It is the nature of consciousness itself. You are simultaneously the observer and the observed, the knower and the known, the one who asks who am I and the awareness in which that question arises. Every answer you arrive at, every conclusion about your identity, is necessarily partial and temporary because you are the infinite expressing itself through the finite, the eternal experiencing itself through time. This is why the spiritual journey never ends, why there is no final destination where you arrive fully enlightened and complete. There is only the ever-deepening exploration of what you are, the continual discovery of new layers and dimensions of consciousness that were always present but not yet illuminated by awareness. And this is not a cause for despair, but rather for wonder and curiosity. You get to spend your entire existence discovering yourself, meeting yourself anew in every moment, surprised by your own depths. The you that begins this journey is not the you that continues it, and the you that continues it is not the you that completes it, because completion itself is an illusion, a concept invented by the thinking mind that cannot tolerate uncertainty and openness. When you truly absorb these psychological truths, when you allow them to penetrate beyond intellectual understanding into the core of your being, something remarkable happens. The desperate search for self-knowledge transforms into a peaceful recognition of what you have always been. You stop trying to fix or improve or perfect yourself and instead become curious about your own unfolding. You recognize that every aspect of your experience, even the parts you have judged and rejected, is teaching you something essential about the nature of consciousness. The anger shows you where you have abandoned your boundaries. The fear reveals what you value and do not want to lose. The shame points to places where you have internalized other people's judgments instead of trusting your own knowing. Every psychological pattern, every emotional reaction, every thought and belief is a breadcrumb on the path back to your essential nature. Not because your essential nature is somewhere else hidden or lost, but because it has been here all along, concealed only by the complicated stories you have told yourself about who you are supposed to be. Manly P. Hall spent his entire life trying to help people see beyond the veil of their own conditioning, to recognize that the search for truth is actually the truth searching for itself through you. You are not separate from what you seek. The consciousness that asks, "Who am I?" is the same consciousness that exists as the answer. There is no distance to travel, no transformation to achieve, only a simple recognition of what has always been present. And yet, paradoxically, this simple recognition requires the complete dismantling of everything you thought you knew about yourself. It requires the courage to look at your shadow, to question your beliefs, to challenge your motivations, to surrender your need for control, to accept your fundamental aloneness, to act before you feel ready, to embrace constant change, to tolerate not knowing. This is the path of genuine self-knowledge, not the comforting path of self-improvement where you get to stay essentially the same while making minor adjustments, but the radical path of self-realization where everything you thought was solid dissolves into mystery and possibility. Se algo dentro de você ressoou com estas palavras, se você sentiu aquela pequena faísca de reconhecimento no fundo da sua alma, não deixe que este momento se perca. Esta não foi apenas mais uma coincidência em seu caminho. O fato de você estar aqui agora ouvindo estas palavras é um sinal da sua prontidão para despertar para uma verdade mais profunda sobre quem você realmente é. Se você está cansado das máscaras, da autoimagem fabricada, de viver uma vida que parece pertencer a outra pessoa, este canal existe para você. Não como mais uma fonte de autoajuda superficial ou técnicas de desenvolvimento pessoal que apenas polichem a superfície sem tocar a profundidade, mas como um espaço de investigação real, de questionamento genuíno, de retorno à essência que o mundo moderno nos ensinou a esquecer. Ao se inscrever, você não está apenas seguindo um canal. Você está declarando ao universo sua disposição para encarar a verdade sobre si mesmo, mesmo quando essa verdade for desconfortável ou desafiadora. Cada vídeo que compartilhamos aqui é como um espelho que reflete de volta para você o que você tem evitado ver, um convite gentil mas firme para despertar do sonho da personalidade construída e reconhecer a consciência que sempre esteve observando tudo isso. Ative também o sino de notificações, não por um desejo nosso de aumentar visualizações, mas porque os momentos em que estas mensagens chegam até você raramente são acidentais. Muitas vezes o vídeo que aparece em seu feed é exatamente a verdade que sua alma estava pronta para ouvir naquele momento específico. Compartilhe também com alguém que você sente que está passando por esse mesmo processo interior de despertar. Alguém que talvez esteja cansado das respostas superficiais e pronto para as perguntas mais profundas. Às vezes, tudo o que precisamos é uma palavra, uma perspectiva diferente para que toda a nossa autoimagem fabricada comece a se desfazer e a verdade possa finalmente emergir. E lembre-se, você nunca esteve sozinho nesta jornada de autoconhecimento. Somos muitos caminhando lado a lado, descobrindo juntos o que significa realmente conhecer a si mesmo, não através de mais conceitos e ideias, mas através da experiência direta da consciência que você é. Até nosso próximo encontro, permita-se questionar tudo o que você pensa que sabe sobre si mesmo. Permita-se ser surpreendido por sua própria profundidade. Permita-se existir, sem a necessidade de definir ou controlar quem você é. You are not who you think you are. You are so much more than that. You are the mystery itself, eternally discovering what it means to be.